November 14th, 2:17 in the morning. My daughter was 11 days old, and I was being cut out of a car on Route 9 while my parents were 40 minutes away, asleep, with their phones on silent, and they had been called. And what I did next, they never saw coming. Before I continue, subscribe if you want to hear how this ends. My name is Renata. I am 33 years old. I am a senior financial analyst for a logistics firm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have spent 11 years building a life that required no rescue from anyone. I own a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street with a magnolia tree in the front yard that blooms every April whether I remember to water it or not. I pay my bills on time. I keep a filing cabinet with folders labeled by year. I am the kind of woman who reads the fine print before she signs anything, not because I am suspicious, but because I learned early that nobody else was going to read it for me. I had grown up the oldest of 2 daughters in a household where love was distributed unevenly and everyone pretended not to notice. My sister Diane was the soft one, the one who needed tending. I was the one who managed. I had been managing since I was 9 years old, making lunches, tracking appointments, sitting in the front seat while my mother talked to me like I was a small adult who happened to be her child. I did not resent it then. I called it capability. I called it a compliment. It took me 20 years and a therapist named Dr. Willa to understand it for what it actually was. The exploitation started the way it always does in families like mine, slowly, in amounts small enough to feel generous rather than transactional. My parents had lived in a house in Concord for 30 years, a house with a leaking roof and windows that no longer sealed properly against the January cold. In March of 2019, I paid $7,200 to have the windows replaced because my mother mentioned in passing that she was cold in the mornings, and her voice had that particular flatness she used when she wanted something but would not ask directly. I wired the money on a Thursday. She called on Friday to say the contractor had been wonderful. She did not say thank you. I told myself it was the kind of thing families did for each other. In August of 2020, my father's truck needed a transmission replacement, $4,800. He called on a Tuesday and had the new figure by Wednesday afternoon. I remember asking if he needed anything else. He said he needed the truck back by Friday because he had a fishing trip planned for the weekend. I drove 40 minutes each way to pick up and drop off the vehicle. He sent me a photo of a bass he caught. That was the communication. A fish. In 2021, my sister Diane had a gap in her rent, 2 months, $1,800 after a breakup left her scrambling. I covered it without announcement. In 2022, my mother had dental work that her insurance did not fully cover, $3,400, which I learned about after the procedure was already scheduled because she had simply assumed I would handle it. I handled it. In 2023, my father asked me to co-sign a small business loan for a landscaping venture he was starting. I did not co-sign. That was the one time I said no, but I gave him $6,000 as a direct gift so he would not need the loan. The business lasted 4 months. He blamed the economy. The total, by the time November of 2024 arrived, was $41,600 across 5 years. I had not been counting in real time. I had been doing what women like me do, absorbing, excusing, reframing every transaction as love rather than extraction. I had a folder in my filing cabinet labeled family. Misk and I had not opened it in over a year, because opening it meant doing the math, and doing the math meant knowing the number, and knowing the number meant I could no longer call it anything other than what it was. My daughter Vera was born on November 3rd, 2024 at 6:42 in the morning. 7 pounds 4 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and the most serious expression I had ever seen on a face that small, like she had arrived already assessing the situation. My husband Marcus was in the delivery room. My mother-in-law drove 4 hours from Raleigh and was waiting in the hallway when I came out of recovery. My own parents sent a text. It said, "Congratulations. Let us know when you're up for visitors." I read it twice. I set my phone face down on the bedside table. They came 4 days later. They held Vera for a combined total of perhaps 20 minutes, left a gift bag with a pale yellow onesie inside it, and spent the majority of the visit telling me about the renovations they were planning for the guest bathroom. My father mentioned the landscaping business might have a second chance if the market improved. My mother asked if I had thought about going back to work early because staying home too long made women soft. I was 4 days postpartum. I smiled. I said the right things. They left at 2:30 in the afternoon, and I sat in the rocking chair in Vera's room with the door closed and breathed very slowly for a long time. November 14th was 11 days after Vera was born. Marcus had gone back to work for 1 day. 1/2 day, actually, just to manage a project handoff. And I had Vera in the infant carrier, and I was driving back from my pediatrician's office on Route 9 when a pickup truck ran a red light at the intersection of Raleigh Street and hit the passenger side of my car. Not the driver's side, the passenger side, the side where Vera's car seat was installed. I want you to sit with that for a moment. The impact spun the car. I do not remember the spin. I remember the sound, a compression of metal and glass. That felt less like a crash and more like the world simply folding. I remember the airbag. I remember the particular smell of it, chemical and sharp, like something industrial and sterile, and then silence, and then Vera crying, and I have never in my life been more grateful to hear a sound. She was crying. She was alive. I was conscious. I had a fracture in my left wrist, 2 cracked ribs, and a laceration across my forehead that would need 14 stitches. But Vera was crying. That was the only number that mattered in that moment. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. I counted because I needed something to count. They assessed Vera first at my insistence and confirmed she was uninjured. Her car seat had performed exactly as designed, holding her through the impact, the kind of engineering that makes you want to find the person who designed it and thank them with your whole body. I was stabilized. We were both transported to Atrium Health Cabarrus. Marcus was called by the paramedics and was in his car within 4 minutes of the call. The hospital also called my parents. This I found out from the admitting nurse, a woman named Patricia who had the particular expression of someone who has witnessed this specific human failure before and has learned to document it without editorializing. She told me quietly, while Marcus was with Vera in the pediatric assessment room, that she had reached my mother at 2:31 in the afternoon. My mother had asked how serious it was. Patricia had explained the situation: car accident, newborn involved. Narrator in emergency with a wrist fracture and lacerations. My mother said she would have to wait for my father to get home from his errand before they could think about coming, and that they would call back. They did not call back. Patricia attempted a second call at 3:45. My father answered, heard the update, and said, and this is in the incident notes, this is a documented sentence: "She's a capable woman. She'll be fine. She doesn't need us hovering. She doesn't need us hovering. I was 11 days postpartum, alone in an emergency bay while my husband held our newborn in a pediatric room down the hall. With a fractured wrist and 14 stitches in my forehead and the chemical smell of an airbag still in my hair, and my father's conclusion was that I did not need hovering. Patricia told me this without inflection. She handed me a glass of water. She said, "We documented both calls in the incident record. Date, time, content of the conversation. It's part of your file." She held my gaze for exactly 2 seconds longer than was strictly necessary. I understood what she was giving me. I said thank you, and I meant it at a depth I could not fully express from a hospital bed. My grandfather Raymond arrived at 5:48 that evening. He is 78 years old, my mother's father, and he lives 45 minutes from Charlotte in a small house he has maintained with meticulous care since my grandmother passed in 2016. He had not been called by the hospital. He had been called by my neighbor Janet, who had seen the news alert for the Route 9 accident and recognized my street address from my emergency contact card. Raymond had driven 45 minutes alone, parked, walked the length of a hospital corridor lit the way hospital corridors are always lit, flat, white, without mercy, and found my room by asking. At the desk, he stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked at the bandage on my forehead and the brace on my wrist and the hospital gown and the untouched dinner tray on the bedside table. He looked at all of it without speaking. Then he walked to the chair beside my bed and sat down and put his large, weathered hand over my good hand on the blanket and said, "Where is she?" I told him Vera was cleared. She was with Marcus. She was fine. He nodded once. He did not cry. Neither did I. We sat in the particular silence that exists between two people who understand each other without performance. After a long moment, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, a gray herringbone jacket he has worn to every important occasion I can remember, and he set a manila envelope on the bedside table. He did not explain it yet. He just set it there, flat, between the water glass and the call button, like it had been waiting in that pocket for a long time and had finally found the right surface. "Your mother called me an hour ago," he said, "to tell me about the accident. She mentioned she and your father hadn't gone in yet because they didn't want to overwhelm you." He said this in a voice that carried no surprise. That was the thing about Raymond. Nothing my mother did surprised him anymore. "I've been carrying something for about 6 years," he said, looking at the envelope. "I kept thinking I'd need it for a different reason. Turns out this is the reason." He told me to rest. He said he would come back in the morning. He stood, straightened his jacket, touched my hand one more time, and walked out into that white corridor. He left the envelope. I did not open it that night. I waited until the next morning when Marcus had taken Vera for a feeding and the room was quiet and the light through the hospital window was that particular flat gray of a November morning, the kind of light that has no warmth in it, just clarity, everything stripped down to its actual shape. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Raymond's careful, slightly tilted script dated March 2018. Addressed to my mother, never sent. I am not going to read you every word, but I will tell you what it said in its essential truth. Raymond had watched, for years, the way my mother extracted from me and excused it, the way she treated my capability as a resource rather than a person, the way she positioned my competence as proof that I didn't need anything rather than proof that I had worked extraordinarily hard. He had written this letter in 2018 after a Christmas gathering where my mother had announced to the family that I had paid for the window replacement. Not in gratitude, but as a demonstration of what I was capable of contributing. He had written it, folded it, and put it in the inside pocket of his gray herringbone jacket because he had hoped, genuinely hoped, that he was reading the situation wrong, that she would surprise him. She had not surprised him. Also inside the envelope were 3 other documents. A copy of my grandparents' original will from 2009, which listed me and my sister as equal beneficiaries of a trust. A handwritten amendment, witnessed and notarized in 2022, which Raymond had executed after my grandmother passed, and which redirected a significant portion of the trust, specifically a property in Mooresville valued at $220,000 at the time of amendment, to a separate account designated for me alone and upon my having children for my direct descendants. The amendment was legal. It had been filed with his attorney. My mother did not know it existed. The third document was a single typed page, dated November 7th. 1 week before the accident, as if Raymond had known something was coming that he couldn't name. It was a letter of intent establishing a custodial investment account in Vera's name, funded initially by Raymond himself to the amount of $15,000, with Raymond named as the sole managing trustee until Vera reached majority or until I chose to assume management. He had done this before the accident, before he knew what my parents would or would not do. He had simply decided, 7 days before that intersection on Route 9 changed everything, that Vera deserved a floor that did not depend on her grandparents' generosity. Drop the word rise in the comments. I read every single one. I sat with those 3 documents in that flat November light for a long time. I set them on my lap one by one, like cards being dealt in a game I had not known I was playing. I thought about $41,600 sitting in a folder at home. I thought about the wrist brace and the 14 stitches and the smell of that airbag. I thought about my daughter, 11 days old, no vote in the family she had been born into, and what she would spend her whole childhood watching. I thought about what it means to decide, in the quiet of a hospital room on a gray November morning, that a pattern ends here. Not loudly, not with performance. Just here, this is where it ends. When Raymond came back that morning, he sat in the same chair beside my bed. He waited while I finished reading. Then he looked at me with the steady, patient eyes of a man who has been waiting a long time to be useful in exactly the right way, and he said, "You want it quiet or you want it true?" I looked at him for a moment. Outside the window, the November sky sat heavy and motionless, the kind of sky that holds everything in and releases nothing. I thought about quiet, and I understood what quiet would cost. I thought about true and what it would require: the composure, the documentation, the precision, the willingness to be present in a room when the room became uncomfortable. I said, "True, but measured." He nodded once. He understood the distinction completely. I was discharged on November 16th. Marcus drove us home through streets that were damp from overnight rain, the pavement dark and reflective. Everything in the November afternoon appearing slightly sharper than usual, the way the world looks after something has rearranged your vision. I spent 4 days healing, nursing Vera, and sitting at my kitchen table in the early morning hours when the house was completely still, and the only sounds were the refrigerator's low hum and Vera's breathing through the baby monitor on the counter. I opened the filing cabinet. I pulled the folder labeled Family MISC. I went back through 5 years of transfers, payments, co-signatures, and gifts, and entered every transaction into a new spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, descriptions the account each had been drawn from. The final figure, confirmed across 3 separate bank statements, was $41,600. I printed the spreadsheet. I put it in a new folder. I labeled the folder with the date and nothing else. I also requested the official incident record from Atrium Health Cabarrus, the documented calls, the times, the transcribed content of both conversations. Patricia had told me it was part of my file. I requested it formally, in writing, and received it within 5 business days. I read every line. I printed it. It went into the folder behind the spreadsheet. The folder was thin, but it was dense. Every page in it was doing work. I then consulted a family estate attorney, not to sue anyone, not to create a spectacle, but to understand my position fully before I walked into any room. The attorney confirmed Raymond's 2022 amendment was airtight and fully filed. She confirmed my parents had no legal claim to the Mooresville property or Vera's custodial account. She said this without drama because it was simply the legal reality of the documents Raymond had executed. I thanked her. I paid the consultation fee of $320. I filed the notes in the same folder. My parents called 4 times in the 2 weeks after the accident. My mother called twice, once to ask how I was doing in a voice that expected to be reassured, and once to mention they were thinking of coming to see Vera and when would be a good time. My father called once to ask if the car insurance process had been easy to navigate. My sister Diane called once to say she had heard what happened and she hoped I was recovering. I answered each call. I was composed and brief. I said Vera was healthy and I was healing and I would be in touch about visits. I gave nothing beyond that. I kept every call under 4 minutes. The confrontation happened 3 weeks after the accident at my parents' house in Concord on a Sunday afternoon they had organized themselves. They called it a Vera visit. Marcus stayed home with Vera. I asked him to. This visit was not for Vera. I arrived at 2:00 in the afternoon carrying a manila folder tucked under my right arm. My wrist was still in a partial brace. The stitches were out, but the scar above my eye was still visible, a thin raised line at the edge of my hairline that I had not covered with makeup. I wanted it visible, not for drama, for accuracy. Some facts belong on the surface. My mother had made coffee. My father was in his armchair. The house smelled exactly as it always had: coffee and old carpet, and the faint chemical sweetness of my mother's fabric softener. The particular combination of a space that has not changed in 30 years. There was afternoon light coming. Through the front window, a long pale rectangle laid across the floor between us. I sat on the couch across from both of them and set the folder on the cushion beside me and did not open it yet. My mother talked for several minutes. About the accident, about how worried they had been, about how they had meant to come to the hospital but had not wanted to crowd me, about how capable I had always been, about how they had known I was in good hands with Marcus. My father nodded at the correct intervals. He mentioned that Marcus seemed like a steady presence. They were building the version of events where their absence was consideration rather than abandonment, performing it for themselves more than for me, constructing a record in real time. I let them finish. I waited for the full pause, the kind that opens a space for a response. Then I reached into the folder and set 3 pages on the coffee table between us. The first was the hospital incident record. Both calls documented, times noted, my father's exact words transcribed. The second was the spreadsheet, 5 years, $41,600, every date and amount in clean columns. The third was a single page I had typed myself, 12-point font, double-spaced. A calm and factual accounting of what had happened on November 14th and what I had decided as a result. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hands flat on my knees. I said, on November 14th at 2:31 in the afternoon, Patricia at Atrium Health Cabarrus called this number. She told you I was in the emergency room with a fractured wrist and lacerations. She told you Vera had been in the car. You said you would call back. I paused. You did not call back. I paused again. My grandfather, who was not called by the hospital, drove 45 minutes alone and was sitting beside my bed by 5:48 that evening. The room went very still. The pale rectangle of afternoon light had shifted slightly. It now caught the edge of my mother's coffee cup, leaving half of it in shadow and half lit, the line between them exact and clean. I continued, over the last 5 years, I have transferred or gifted this family $41,600. Every transaction is on that page with the date and the amount. I have not asked for any of it back. I am not asking now, but I want you to know that I know the number and I want you to know that the number is done. I looked at my father. He was looking at the spreadsheet. His jaw was set in the way that was trying to appear neutral and only achieved emptiness. His face did not crumble. It did not move through visible emotion. It simply emptied, like something behind his eyes stepped back from the window and pulled the curtain closed. What was left was just the surface of a face. My mother looked at the incident record. She looked at it the way a person looks at a photograph of themselves doing something they hoped no one had captured. Her hands were still in her lap. After a long moment, she looked up at me and her face went through something complicated and unfinished, and then settled into the same stillness. Not peace, the absence of performance. I picked up the folder. I stood. I said, I love you. I think you love me in the way you are capable of. But I need you to understand that what happened on November 14th is not something I can set aside, and what has happened over the last 5 years is not something I am going to continue. Vera is going to grow up knowing that her mother has a spine. I want her to learn that from watching me. I left the 3 pages on the table. I walked to the front door. I turned once, not for effect, but because something in me needed to see the room from that angle, needed to hold that image. My parents sitting in that pale afternoon light, the 3 pages on the coffee table between them, my mother's cup half in shadow, the silence in the room so complete that the refrigerator hum from the kitchen was the only sound. It looked like a still frame from a film that had been shot in black and white on purpose. Everything sharp, everything stripped of warmth, nothing soft left to hide behind. I closed the door behind me. The fallout moved the way things move in families structured around a central fiction. Slowly at first, then all at once. My mother called the following Tuesday. She said she thought I had been unfair, that I had ambushed them, that the accident had clearly affected me in ways I hadn't yet processed. I said I had processed it very carefully and was continuing to process it with a professional, and that I would be in touch when I was ready. I ended the call. My father did not call for 11 days, and when he did, he asked how Vera was doing and did not mention the folder or the table or any page that had been on it. I told him Vera was healthy. I said I would send photos. I did not invite a visit. Diane called the following Saturday. She had heard pieces of it from my mother. She said she was sorry, not specifying what for, whether for the accident or the hospital or the history before it or the Sunday in Concord, but she said it and it was not nothing. I thanked her. We talked for 20 minutes about Vera and Diane's job and a show she had been watching. It was the most ordinary conversation we had shared. In years, small, real, that was enough. The Mooresville property appraised in January at $247,000. Raymond transferred formal management to my name in February. My parents were notified by Raymond's attorney as a matter of legal requirement, not invitation, not discussion. My mother called Raymond twice. He answered once, listened to what she had to say, and told her that decisions he made with his own property were his alone to make. No apology, no elaboration. Raymond has always known exactly how many words a thing requires. The community, the church circle, the neighbors, the network my parents had maintained for 30 years learned what had happened through the natural movement of information in tight spaces. I said nothing directly to anyone. I did not need to. The incident record existed. Raymond's choices were visible. Certain conclusions arranged themselves without assistance. It is 7 months later now. Vera is 8 months old. She has moved past the serious newborn expression into something more exploratory. She reaches for everything within range. She has strong opinions about oatmeal. She has discovered that laughing is something her body can do, and she does it completely with every part of herself. She is extraordinary in the specific way that children are extraordinary when you have been paying attention to them from the very first moment. I went back to work in February on a modified remote schedule. By April, I was full capacity, and in May, I was asked to lead a new analytics initiative that will occupy the next 18 months. I meet with Dr. Willa every other Thursday. We have been working through the particular grief that lives beneath competence, the kind you do not recognize as grief because it does not look like loss, it looks like function, it looks like being fine, it looks like a woman who reads the fine print and wires money on Thursdays and manages everything without being asked. Underneath all of that, there is a child who needed her parents and was told she didn't need hovering. We are locating her. It is slow work. It is the right work. Raymond comes for dinner every other Sunday. He sits at my kitchen table and holds Vera in his lap and tells her things, quiet, unhurried things I cannot always hear from across the room. And she watches his face with that serious expression she was born with, like she is already filing it away for later. Like she knows, in whatever way 8-month-olds know things, that this man drove 45 minutes without being asked and walked the length of a white hospital corridor to sit beside her mother in the dark. The door to my parents is 1 inch open. Not because I am waiting for them to become different people. They will not. But because I am not made of the material that slams doors and walks away clean. I am made of something that holds complexity, the reality that people can fail you at your lowest moment and still mean something to you, that love and disappointment can exist in the same space without canceling each other out. The door is 1 inch open. When Vera is old enough to have her own feelings about that door, she will make her own choices about it. I will not make them for her. I have made enough choices for other people. If this touched something real, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.